Amber, welcome to the Nifty Travel Podcast.
Thank you.
And well, one thing I always like to uh, ask my guests to break the ice is to ask you about your first memories of travel.
Mine, um, my first trip was actually a mission trip to Kenya. So I was 15, 16 years old and went over to share what I believe, and it set a very different trajectory than what I believed was going to happen. It was a great experience, but I felt I needed to be more hands on. If I want to make a difference, I want to do either work in orphanages or work on building projects or painting or gardening or whatever other organizations do. So it was a really good learning experience, and I absolutely loved it.
So, did you have an expectation of what Kenya would be like, and had it changed by the time your trip had ended?
People don't believe me when I say this, but no, it met all my expectations. My mom was great at sharing what the world is like, how people live, what their daily lives are like. We watched a lot of programs like National Geographic, Discovery Channel, so I knew there would be a difference in how I live and how others live, and what just their daily lives would look like, what the landscape, to a certain extent. I didn't understand how the landscape would look, but just general, it met all my expectations, and I absolutely loved it. I love when people want to go to Kenya or other destinations in Africa just because it's so beautiful and different than what we're used to in North America.
Yes, and so talking about Canada, that's the country where you grew up. So
Yes.
when you returned to Canada uh, for the first time,
Yes.
did you look at your own country with a different set of eyes?
Um, to a certain extent, yes. I didn't actually want to come back to Canada. I wanted to stay where I was and find other ways to help or live, but I hadn't graduated yet, so I had to come home to finish my education. Um, but what it did help was the people I told about my experience was quite wide eye-opening for them. They weren't as knowledgeable about how some of the world is. They'd never had those experiences. And I think at the time there were lots of those World Vision commercials focusing on the famine in Ethiopia. And a lot of people seem to think that they were exaggerating what these different countries in Africa are like. And I think to have that firsthand experience to share what I did, what I saw, and where I was, I think it helped change their perspectives more than my own, actually.
Oh, right, that's interesting.
Yeah,
So, so growing up in Canada, um, well, it's a big country in its own right, isn't it? So,
it
uh,
is.
what do you find is the motivation for Canadians wanting to explore outside of their own country?
The number one is probably to escape winter. Depending on where they're located in Canada, winter can be very severe. So you'll find a lot of Canadians travel between October and March to avoid some of those really cold months. And then just in general, Canadians really enjoy exploring new places with history or different culture, foods. Um, even adventure activities. We've got a lot here, but some people like to experience that elsewhere. So the draw is to get away from the cold, probably number one, and two is what else is actually out there in the world.
Mm. Yeah, well, the world is a big place. Well, talking to
Yeah,
yesterday, who loves snowboarding, and I think he
yeah,
has spent quite a bit of his time in Canada from time to time.
right.
He found the snow and fell in love with
Excellent.
it.
Oh, good.
So, when it comes to how we view the world, well, we all have a we all have a different set of eyes, don't you? When Brits think of going down under, they only think of one country. How do Canadians view the southern hemisphere?
Some are very knowledgeable. So if we're talking Southern Hemispheres in Australia, New Zealand, South Pacific Islands, um, they they don't necessarily know what they want to do. They understand that there's a lot to see and do, and it's the attitude is changing because now there's better flight and connectivity, so they can go to more places. It's not as long. Getting to Australia took, on average, 36 hours. Now, depending where you're located, it's a 15 and a half hour flight and you're on the ground. So it's reduced by at least half. Um, if we look at other Southern Hemisphere destinations like Latin America or even kind of the southern end of Africa, a lot of people are very interested, but they don't necessarily know too much about it unless they've got connections. So sometimes people are influenced by people they meet. They hear how others who are here come from those countries and they love where they're from, especially Latin Americans. They're very proud. And so they will share what they do or where they lived or some of the sites. And that motivates and it encourages people to go see it. And they'll do their own research before they actually do the trip. So they've got that best experience while they're on the ground.
Yeah, South America is interesting, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
uh, people I've spoken to from South America, uh, they have a very rich way of um, describing it. And
Yeah.
I actually suggested to them that, South America really is a continent full of mystery and even
Yes.
mysticism that a lot of us don't really understand. Do you think do Canadians look at it in a similar sort of way?
I don't, there's probably some. I think it's more the culture and the landscape. A lot of Canadians are very outdoorsy. And the ones who aren't, they really love the big cities with the different activities or the sites or using them as bases to get from one location to another. So I don't know. There's some who will travel for mysticism or um, enlightenment or wellness as well. But my experience is there's not a lot who will do that. It's a very niche group of people who are doing
Mm, yeah. Well, each to their own, as they say, isn't
that.
it? So when it comes to Australia, um, that where you're most likely to see the most um, overseas tourists is in the
Yeah.
main cities, isn't it? I mean, people just
Yes.
they descend on Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, um,
Yeah.
and maybe Western Australia. Um, would you say that is kind of a consistent starting point for most visitors to Australia?
Most will not do Western Australia. That's typically a second, third, or fourth trip for people who have never been. They're usually starting in, like you said, the Melbourne, Sydney, and Cairns actually, and then we get people who will add on Adelaide, Kangaroo Island. A few will add on Brisbane. Most of the ones adding on Brisbane have family or friends who have been or are living there and they want to go visit. And then Ayers Rock would be if they've got a longer amount of time, they'll add that on. If it's shorter, they'll choose 3 to 4 cities.
Well, the Brits are those that have had them over the decades.
Yeah,
They often have family members who either visit there long term or who have
yeah.
actually migrated to Australia. Is that a are there many Canadians that have migrated that way over the?
Yes, there's so they'll visit family or friends. So, or if they've traveled, a lot of Canadians get invitations to go stay or meet with the Australians, and so they'll incorporate that into their trip. And Aussies are great hosts, so they'll actually say, "Plan this portion to stay with me, and we'll take you around to see everything that's in this area." Um, and and they have just an absolutely amazing time because they're with the locals, going and seeing all the sights, and then those who have family members or even in-laws. A lot of people, if the marriage is really good, they actually go and they'll spend times. Um, One of the parents of one of the adult kids will go over to Australia, spend however long over there, and then the Australian parents will come over to Canada and they'll do split stays with each other.
All right. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I do find is that Australians are very welcoming, but they don't tend to travel a great deal in their own country.
Yes.
Um, I've heard it. We were talking briefly about Western Australia, and it's almost like a uh, somewhere they don't go to very often because it takes them 5 hours to get there.
Yes.
Uh, they know it's Australian, but it's kind of like they feel that. Well, I mean, the majority of them all live on the east, um, in the three big cities in the east coast, don't they? So, uh,
Yes.
do you think there are certain areas of Australia that get left out? I've been reading stories about Tasmania, for instance. You know,
Yes.
uh, a
Yep. Tasmania is one, but that we usually say you basically want to dedicate a whole trip. If you can't spend 5 to 7 days there as a minimum, you're not going to have the best experience. There's so much to see and do, and to have anything less of that, you're doing yourself a disservice by not spending that time there. If you can spend a full 14 days, you're going to have an amazing experience, and you wouldn't necessarily have to go again. And others, Western Australia is missed at least by North Americans because of that 5 hour flight until they go back, say that second or third time. And that whole coral coast, most people aren't aware of Ningaloo Reef. They just have everybody set on the Great Barrier Reef, and I have to see that, I have to do that. But if you look at the Ningaloo Reef, that would be just as big of an experience or better because you can actually access it from the beach. It's a fringing reef, which means you can walk in and just go snorkel. And a lot of people who aren't aware of that, they go, "Oh, maybe I should have incorporated this side because that sounds fantastic." And then heading up into the Kimberleys or Darwin region, a lot of that is missed. It's a lot of outback wildlife. There's a lot of Aboriginal experiences as well, and it's because it's just that remote, unknown areas that are now well connected. A lot of people just aren't aware of what all is up there, so they're missing out on that itself.
Mm, yeah, maybe it's just a confidence thing, or just a lack of awareness.
Yes. And sometimes it's time too, because people do have a set amount of time that they're going to travel to. So it's what are their highlights that they want to see and they have to experience at least on this trip. And let's look at the other places on the next one.
Yeah, yeah. One thing having done a few road trips, one thing I've found that's consistent is that, well, there's a lot of beaches uh,
Yes.
on a continent. You can also, it's almost, it feels sometimes that you've booked your own beach because
Yes.
there are just so many remote beaches you can visit. You can be there on your own if you want. But Aussies themselves have a fascination with the coast. Um, well, I mean, most of their major dwellings and cities are all scattered around the coast, aren't they? But it just seems to me like anyone who can afford a boat
Yes.
or some sort of pleasure craft has one, and they seem to go
Yeah.
absolutely um, nuts for it. And I think that's absolutely a fascinating thing about them and the country.
Yes.
So what about New Zealand? Often, those are two countries that love to rub rub each other.
They
Um,
sure do.
but it's still,
Mhm.
it's a great set of, it's a great country in its own right, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Absolutely stunning. It's breathtaking. It's so diverse and it's just so tiny, but it's just absolutely, yeah, beautiful and stunning. It's no offense, but it's like my favorite. Yeah.
Oh, so why do you like it then?
It is, so New Zealand is really the only place that has no predators. No, you're supposed to say no poisonous insects, but that's not quite true. There's four spiders that have been, um, three of them have been imported. One is native. And so you have, while you're out, I mean, the worst thing you're going to come across is potentially a boar, but there really aren't a lot on islands. So if you're a hiker or mountaineer and you're like being out in the bush, then you've got nothing really to fear except for maybe your own inexperience or a misstep. The people are Kiwis are absolutely welcoming and friendly. I joke that Canadians have a run for their money with how friendly Kiwis are, because I sometimes wonder if they're more friendly than we are. They're great hosts. They're hospitable, and then the country itself is just easy to navigate if you love road trips or wandering. Uh, they've got just these cute little towns around almost every bend, and then as you're traveling, depending how well you're traveled, the landscapes remind you of other destinations you've been. So you might go across some hills and you're going, this feels like England or Wales or Scotland. And you'll keep going, and more so the South Island, you'll be going around a bend, and those from Canada or mountainous regions, you go, am I back? Like, I'm pretty sure I went on that long flight to get here. And so it's very reminiscent of other places in the world.
Mm. Yeah, and it's not a highly populated area either.
No,
Um,
no.
even even going to say Wellington or Auckland, they don't feel like cities in some respect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Auckland probably more so now. It has grown quite a bit. But Wellington's nice and small. It's limited in how big it can get because of the natural landscape around it. So they can't really develop much more there. And New Zealand government very clearly with the uh, visa restrictions, they don't want a lot of foreigners moving in. They want you to come experience, enjoy the country for short term, and then go back to your own country.
Yeah. Would you agree that the North and South Islands are they're very distinct in their own right?
100% yes. Yeah. Um, yeah.
Because the South Island in particular, it doesn't feel that populated, and yet if you're a more adventurous person, there are plenty of places and activities
Yeah.
you can go to and almost get yourself. I was going to say lost. Uh, I don't want to, but I suppose I mean immerse yourself uh,
Yes.
in the country and yeah, not come into contact with many people.
That's very true. There's a lot of open space. There's tons of hikes down there, depending on what season you're traveling in. There's sections of motorways that you wouldn't come across another vehicle for ages. If you're sticking to the main motorways, then you're going to see quite a few vehicles. But if you're someone like myself who veers off track quite often, you'll miss everybody, but you'll see absolutely stunning scenery that nobody else is seeing because they're not diverting, whether it's intentional or accidental.
Mm. So, are you someone who likes the outdoors?
Yes, I am. Love being outdoors.
So, do you? So, when you go on trips, do you? I don't know, like going searching for wildlife, or sort of just enjoying nature in general.
It depends on whether it's a work trip or personal, or if I'm blending the two together. So I try to blend it all as evenly as possible, depending whether I've been or not as well. So I'll try to incorporate those outdoors, whether it's the walking, hiking, or if it's just going to certain points for those scenic views. And then if I can incorporate unique wildlife that's known in that area or region, I'll try to do that. The critters don't like me, so half the time I don't see what I'm there to see. But at the same time, the ones that I do get to see, it's absolutely fantastic.
So, have you got any favorite creatures you've seen out in the wild? Um,
Um, in New Zealand, they have very unique birds that make you think of dinosaurs, and those would probably be my favorites. And I actually, and a lot of their birds. I am not a birder. I have never had an interest in birds until I went to New Zealand. I am more than happy to spot a bird to see how different or unique it is there. Oh, actually, my favorite would probably be the huru, which is an owl. They're this teeny little owl, um, and they're just cute. They'll open their eyes in the middle of the day. They'll kind of glance at you like, "Ugh, what are you doing here?" And you can carry on. You can be within a few feet of them, and they just give you that funny look, and that's it. But that would, strangely enough, that's probably one of my favorites I've come across.
yeah. Well, I think we forget sometimes that we're part of the animal kingdom, and they do you find that they appear to be as curious about us as we are about them?
Depending on your personality, yes. So those who are more high energy, I find, or just kind of louder and bigger animals aren't necessarily as curious. If they are, they'll stand further away. If you can quiet down and calm yourself in your excitement for seeing them, I think they show more curiousness about us and are more willing to engage with us as well.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes to the great outdoors, I know you're from Canada,
Yeah.
and I probably can't, I won't be able to persuade you to say that there's any other country better than Canada. But excluding Canada,
Yeah.
which areas have you been to that really sort of well left a positive impression on you?
There are lots. There's so many great places. So even just looking at England, I love the Lakes District. That just Snowdonia in Wales. Wow. Especially when it's an overcast day. That's stunning. In Vietnam, Halong Bay, what a beautiful area. I know people will joke that the water's dirty or maybe their experience wasn't great, but it's just breathtaking going through there. In Africa, the Masai Mara National Reserve, that landscape is so different from probably anything else I've ever seen. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Near Adelaide, there's a little peninsula that you have to fly to called the Eyre Peninsula, and there's a little town called Port Lincoln, and there's a few other little towns in that area. Man, is it gorgeous. It's got a lot of similarities to places in New Zealand and Canada. It was this funny blend of where I grew up and some of my favorite regions in New Zealand. So I personally don't think Canada has it all. I think you need to go and explore these other places because they're just breathtaking and stunning. It's you're not going to get it. You'll get an idea of it in places in Canada, but you're not going to get the full width of how diverse each place is.
Mm. I sometimes think it's when we allow ourselves to both look, perhaps to smell the local scents and
Yeah.
actually listen to the sounds. That's when you, um, I think that's you can gain a lot from that.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah, and it triggers the memory as well. So if you go to these different places and then you come back and you smell something similar, it can trigger your memory and you can go, "Oh, yes. I was in that spot when I think I remember this smell," or even sound. Sometimes sounds will trigger where it's like, "Oh, when I was in this place, there was this festival or there was this person who was maybe doing a show on the street, or you went to an actual theater and saw a production where it was a local form of art." So,
Yeah. No, I think our memories are much stronger than we sometimes
yeah.
give them credit for. You can do so much with a camera and a a video recorder.
Yeah.
Um, but we personally we capture um, other other aspects completely.
Yes.
So in the southern hemisphere, there are
Yep.
quite there are lots of smaller island nations. Are
Yes.
there um, are there particular highlights that capture people's attention? Do you think more than others?
Cook. Yeah. Yes, and that would be based on what they know about places. And some of the smaller island nations, people still, it takes quite a while to get there. You're still either doing long boat rides or flights are um, maybe once a week. So it's kind of that. Am I going to be trapped in a place that has nothing to do? Um, but the main ones that people show the most interest would be Fiji, Cook Islands. Um, Depending on where in the world you live, Samoa, Tonga, Vanuatu are popular as well. Lesser known, but still of good value is New Caledonia. There's Niue. Um, oh gosh, there's lots of islands.
Mm. Well, the reason I ask is that I saw a YouTuber trying a route I'd never considered,
Oh
and
yes,
that was Air Tahiti does direct flights to LA,
yeah,
uh, and if you weren't stopping in Tahiti, you could carry on to New Zealand or Australia. And I thought,
yes,
oh, I, I didn't, I thought, well, there's something that not everybody talks about.
yes, yep. French Polynesia has a bunch of island groups. So most people would be going to the Society Islands, which is your Bora Bora, Tahiti, Moorea. That's kind of your traditional experience. But there's other islands within the area that, like the Marquesas. If you can look up the Marquesas, I think that when people realize what it offers, how remote it is, and how special, I think that would people would just be like, I need to get there. I need to figure out how I can make this affordable and go have this experience because it's got all the outdoors. It's got local people who have been there for ages um, that can share their story and their history and show you around the islands. They're just very different from a lot of other island groups.
So have you noticed a lot of distinctive differences between the islands?
I do, yes. I can't say everybody else does, but when I go to these different islands and experience them, they're vastly different. As a travel consultant, I will recommend different islands over others based on what you share with me, what your interests are, and what you're hoping to gain out of your holiday. You might come to me and say, "Oh, I want to go to Fiji," but actually, Samoa might be a better island for you, based on what you share.
Hmm. Well, I mean, we all should hopefully realise there's a lot of cultural differences between island nations, and I suppose that
Yes.
that that that's a contributory factor, isn't it?
Hmm.
So, are you a sunrise or a sunset person?
Depends on if there's an activity available. I will get up early for experiences, so like hot air balloon rides, done. I'll wake up for that. That's a very early start. But I do love evenings. I love the stillness and quiet at night, or if it's a clear night, being able to look at the stars. Growing up where I did, there was also the chance of seeing aurora borealis. So I'm quite fond of night because you've got that possibility of um, seeing it.
And of course, you get a different view of the stars depending on where you go, don't you?
Yes. Yeah.
I remember doing that on the back of uh, well, in a swimming pool in Sydney, and of course, you have to remember to delete the aircraft going across whilst trying
Right.
to look at the stars.
Yes. Yeah.
What I find interesting about going to islands is the variety of plants. I mean, I never,
Oh, yes.
in the UK, we're used to our own set of plants, and if you want to see something tropical, you go to the garden centre and you get all these
Right.
you see all these warnings. You can't put that in the garden unless you have a special climate zone. But when you
Yeah.
see them actually in the area you expect to see them, I don't know. It changes everything. Have you
Yeah.
seen any plants that are in their natural habitat that have taken your breath away?
Good question. I don't think I've had that, but I have purposely gone on what might be considered agricultural tours to go see what's growing or what's available. So, and even and try some of it as well, because when fruits and plants are imported, their smell or their taste change greatly. Whereas when you can have it fresh off the vine, that's something else. Um, but yeah, I don't think those curly ferns. I can't remember what they're called. I love seeing those. They're found in some of the islands in New Zealand. But other than that, I'm not really a plant person.
Fair enough. So um, one thing about small island nations, of course, is
Yeah,
is that really, from a practical perspective, there can only be so many people um, there at any given time. There are some islands in the Mediterranean, for instance, who in recent times, are expressing concerns about over tourism. Do you think
yeah.
the islands that you promote, uh, do you think they have a good sustainability plan?
So far, yes. And a lot of that is because of accommodation availability. So if there's no accommodation, you can't have more than what can be accommodated. So at this point, um, and just for lack of people's knowledge of how to get there or how long they're staying, I don't think we'll see that overpopulation or over tourism for many years, just because these island nations don't have that infrastructure to have masses descend upon them. The only time you're really going to see that mass tourism is when some of those cruise ships come into port. And in that case, a lot of depending on how many tourists are already on island, you're really only going to see the impact if you book tours. Some of those tour operators, if they've got a cruise ship coming in, they're not going to have capacity for anybody else. So, um, but in most cases, a lot of those groups are staying close to the port area, depending how big the island is. So those who are already on island, they can hit the road and go to the other side and avoid everyone who's just descended on the island.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed, particularly in Asian countries, is that there's been a real explosion of hotels and resorts,
Yeah.
uh, and in some cases, they appear to be expanding at such a rate that they're outstripping the demand. Have you noticed it anywhere in on your travels or areas you've considered sending people to?
No, the only areas I can think of that have kind of had that hotel explosion, it's actually needed because of what's been happening with Airbnbs. A lot of countries or cities, they're changing the rules and requirements. So where people were finding these lower prices or feeling more like they're staying at home, they're now having to switch to hotels. So you actually need that hotel growth, at least in those cities, because now with the Airbnbs not being available or limited, um, you need more beds for the people who are going. And in those cases, those are some of those cities where they need to start looking at maybe we need to reduce how many tourists are actually coming to these destinations and staying at any given time. Um, but a lot of the destinations, at least the ones that we work with or that I've been going, um, in high season, it's very hard to actually find accommodation. You need to book early to actually get that availability.
Yeah. It's interesting though, isn't it? There are different, like I said, different attitudes depending on destinations. Uh,
Hmm.
a friend of mine was saying that when he sends people to, I don't know, to a Spanish city, for example, um, a number of people, when he suggests, look, you could stay 50 kilometers away from the city and still
Hmm.
experience the city, he sometimes gets a lot of pushback from
Right.
people who think that that the only way to be fully immersed is to stay actually in the city, uh, and they don't necessarily realize that they can get a very similar experience and probably for a lower cost. Do you see that at all?
Not for the destinations that I'm focused on. A lot of them, if you're suggesting an area outside a main city, there's a lot to see and do, and that's part of the experience that they're going to want. So just as a simple example, people who are going to Sydney, they typically want to also visit the Hunter Valley. There's stunning accommodation in the Hunter Valley. It's about 2 hours away. So you get people to go up there and they're already doing stuff in that region anyway. So rather than driving 2 hours out, 2 hours back to have that experience, now there's that benefit of, oh, actually, we can stay here. We can have our wine tour. We can go out on go see local wildlife and then head into the city and head off where we can stay in the city and do what we wanted to see. So I think I'm really fortunate with the destinations I'm focused on in that we don't get a lot of pushback from that because it's part of the experience they actually want.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess it's in the end, it's you are kind of directing people in a certain direction wherever possible. with
Yes.
with with that in mind,
Yeah.
uh, so in terms of water-based
Mm.
experience, um, are there favorite activities that you see? I don't know, watching dolphins or going whale hunting, or
Yeah.
are there many
Uh,
people like doing that?
a lot of people like snorkeling. That's a huge. huge activity. People who are divers or surfers, they typically are good at choosing their own adventures and going where they're going to get the best of that. Some divers, they want other, depending on their experience level or how aware they are of the different locations, they'll come and they'll ask for new, what do you know, or where have you heard is really good. Um, Kite surfers and stand-up paddleboarders, a lot of them, they're easy enough to rent or borrow while you're in destination. So they that's in a certain extent it's popular, but not as much as say your snorkeling or even your water-based animal encounters. With a lot of Canadians aren't going to do whale watching unless they're from interior Canada, because we get the whales and the seals on the coast. I still encourage it though, because they still are great to see in other destinations. But um, things like shark cage diving and swimming with seals, or one of the growing trends is swimming with cuttlefish. So those are starting to grow, and they're starting to become, oh, this is an activity we should be looking at. Where can I actually do this?
Mm. Well, um, well, fish is what we like to eat, but we also need to protect them as well, don't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any do you have any favorite destinations that you've been to that have really sort of I don't know, impressed you? I mean, I went to Australia and I couldn't believe that I went to an aquarium because you can see most of what they have in there.
Yeah.
If you're prepared to go to, make the effort to go, I don't know, to a reef.
Yes. Water. I've actually done a lot of snorkeling. I love being under the water, or like doing water-based activities. So I think I like them all. In Kenya, there's a little island called Mombasa, or there's a city, Mombasa. We went snorkeling out from there. That was my first experience. So that's probably why that one stands out as absolutely loving it. Is it was the first time I snorkeled. Um, Fiji has great, you can swim with sharks there. There's lots of reef around the different islands. Um, a lot of the island resorts, you can just walk into the water and go snorkeling, and you're seeing wildlife right away. In Australia, just off that Eyre Peninsula, got to go swim with the sea lions, and it was so neat because just in the little area we were in, even the underwater landscape changed. In one section, it's all grass, and it's just this beautiful flowing um, grass there. And then you swim over to a different area, and it's almost this rocky outcrop underwater. So those would probably be some of the bigger highlights. But I have more places on the list that I need to go experience.
Yes. Wow. It's. I always think that if you can leave any place wanting more, that's
Yeah.
probably a sign of a good destination.
Yes.
So I can't believe it's like 5 years since that pandemic thing. Um,
Mm.
how do you think? Well, first of all, um, how d- how did how did the travel industry cope with it, and do you think uh, it changed what travelers wanted to do off as a result of it?
The I actually lost my job during it, so I didn't get to stay and travel. But it was a very heartbreaking experience. At the very beginning, a lot of people were not kind to the travel industry, not specifically looking at the operators, but just travel consultants, travel advisors. People were very, and that's not everybody's story as well, but there were a lot of people who were mean about it. It was very different from any of the other experiences or outbreaks that have happened. So even looking at foot and mouth disease. There was an outbreak of that, and it had affected some travel many years ago. And it was essentially a vicious beast this time. But as people realized, as the whole thing progressed, a lot of people actually realized how fortunate they were when they had travel advisors, because they kept fighting for them for those refunds or travel credits. Um, so even though it started off quite poorly, I think overall it changed. A lot of the tour operators, it looked like they were going to have some really good rules, terms, and conditions post that would help travelers. And we're starting to see a switch where it's actually becoming more restrictive than it was. So I'm truthfully a little disappointed in some of these tour operators and airlines, because they're starting to go back to how they were pre-pandemic, which makes travel, at least for the terms and conditions part, it takes some of the fun away, because it's, well, what happens? And now people are more aware of, I need travel insurance, but what actually is included? What am I covered for? If something happens, how easy is it to contact them, or what is the process of making a claim? So on the one hand, it's not been great, still continuing, but it's going to be different for each organization and company as to what they see. And then for travelers, I think it's just sparked that I need to go and do it, and I'll do it to the best that I can right now. It doesn't have to be perfect. So a good example is Australia. A lot of people just go, oh, I'll do it at some point, but they want 5 to 8 weeks to do it because it's so big. They want to do it in one go. Now you start seeing people go, what can I do in 2 or 3 weeks? What are the highlights? Let's at least do this. And then I can look at it again. And I think that's a lot of that has to do with people finally going, oh, there's nonstop flights, or there's less connections now to get to these destinations. So I think that has helped a lot, is people finally going, there are ways to get to these destinations, and it's not going to take me 24, 48, 72 hours.
Yeah, so people are now doing things that they were previously putting off, is basically
Yeah.
what you're saying. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
They're finally going, let's just do this to the best that we can. And if we can do another one, fantastic. If we can't, at least we experienced what we did.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of traveling generally, do you think do you think people miss what would commonly be described as hidden gems? Do you think people follow the crowds too much instead of thinking of alternatives?
Yes and no. If people aren't self-driving, a lot of them will um, stick to the traditional, but we try to emphasize having at least one free day so that you can go off and explore on your own. There's a lot of really neat websites or people who travel where you can literally search for hidden gems or unique experiences. And if people put the time and effort into doing that, they can add that. So if I'm aware of something, I'll share it, and if I'm not, but I feel I need to add more value to what I've shared, or what I'm suggesting people do, I'll do that search myself and go, this looks amazing. I think it would suit them, and I'll share that. And the other thing is talking to locals. There's so many destinations where locals are more than happy to chat with you, and if you ask them what's your favorite place or what's your favorite experience, they'll tell you. They'll have a full-on conversation with you. If you do this, and this, and then you go over there, that fills today. And if you need more to do, I can give you more. So there, people are very open and aware of those hidden gems and searching it out. But
I think you're
it's,
right. Yeah, I think you're right.
yeah.
Local people are a great source of information. Yeah, well, I spoke to a chap in Sydney, and I said, "Well, everybody seems to go to the, the opera house and the bridge
Yeah.
and the parks, blah blah blah. You know, do you think they miss anybody? He said, well, yeah, there's hundreds of things to do in Sydney.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a matter of, do you want the iconic experience so you can check it off, or do you want to go off the beaten track and have those other experiences?
Hmm. Do you think history is an important plays an important part in travel?
I don't know that it does. Well, so for interest groups, yes. Yes, it does. Um, if you were to look at some of the original routes that started travel as well, I think I think there's a lot of hidden gems that were not, that have just been lost for how people travel, and not necessarily the same way they traveled, but some of the same routes they took. Um, there's a lot of those old paths that we can't actually follow in those footsteps to have those same experiences, because those routes just literally don't exist, whether it's flights or boat trips. um, and and with history as, say, a focus of an interest focus, then yes, that definitely impacts travel and where people are wanting to go to get, whether it's family history or just key historic events that have happened, and seeing where that actually took place.
Mm, yeah. And but in terms of the you slightly touched on it there in
Yeah.
terms of the way people travel. Well, the way
Hmm.
people travel has definitely changed. Um, do you think there's a demand for slower forms of travel? Like walking or uh, cycling, perhaps taking the train or the bus. To sort of somebody described it to me the other day as slow madding.
Oh. um, Slower. Yes and no. People who are interested in cycling and hiking, there are great places, and those who aren't comfortable doing it on their own, there are fantastic organizations that help facilitate that. Um, when I worked for other agency, there were people who were interested in going on houseboats or barges. They would hire them, and you would just slowly meander down whatever waterway you were on. So there's people who are willing to do that and experience that. Um, and as much as people try to say, "Oh, I want to go slow," or slow the pace down, a lot end up having pretty quick paced itineraries because they're trying to fit so much into whatever their time is. And but when you get those ones who want that slower pace, that's fantastic, because now they're fully immersed in whatever their destination is, and they're really able to appreciate and enjoy what are the locals doing, where are the locals, or if it's a small town, what does this small town have to offer? Maybe it's the cobblestone, or maybe it's the little market, or there's this cute little shop or cafe or tea place that they get to actually sit down and appreciate and enjoy, and even just people watch.
Mm. Oh, I think people watching is fascinating. You get to learn what the locals like doing, or just watching
Yes.
other tourists can be interesting.
Yes, it can. Yeah.
So I see you have a whole category dedicated to seniors traveling. Is that kind of a growing category, and how different are they to mainstream travelers?
Um, Seniors, they're still, so what's great is that we've got this title that, um, a lot of people go, oh, they're old and not as active. But what's really great is they are some of the most active and adventurous people. Um, and they're still keen to go and see and do it all. And it's kind of two groups, where you've got the fully active, and then you've got the ones who are starting to have those mobility issues, or health is starting to fail. And there's still tons for them to see and do. There's still companies that they can be partnered with, or they can still go on their own and do things, but they've got touch points along the way to make sure that they're okay, or they're being looked after. Um, there's finally now organizations that will pair solo travelers up as well. So you've got somebody who's of a similar age group who's interested, but doesn't have that circle of friends who they can say, hey, do you want to go off and do this with? They're finally now having that opportunity to meet somebody brand new who could be from the same country, or they could be from somewhere else. And now they've got this great connection of this shared experience and shared interest with where they're going.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Actually, there are a lot more solo based uh,
Yes.
trip organizers out there now. It's
Yeah.
it's no longer a niche activity.
Yes. Yeah. And it's about time, because people who are traveling on their own, not everybody is wired or wants to actually do everything on their own. They want to be with others, but they just might not have that social network where they can ask somebody to join them. So now they've got opportunity to meet others, and they don't feel alone while they're doing it, if that's how they feel when they travel on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to wrap up, then, I like to ask, the travel industry is changing all the time. Are there things that you see that are working well, and things that you think could improve? Anything stand out for you?
There's lots that could be improved, but it's a part of people actually speaking up and sharing when things aren't working. Um, as one person, there's not a lot of waves that can be made, but when people actually speak out or speak up. So improvements, I would say, within the air industry, we could use some lesser, some better restrictions, not being as restrictive. It's grown quite a bit, but have inclusions. Actually include things in the airfare. Stop moving backwards and not having these basic fares. That's very backwards. I don't know if anybody else feels that, but it's causing a lot of problems having these fares that are not inclusive of, say, bags or your seat selection or meals. What's working? That would probably be the biggest part for me. Working well, all the tour groups that are offering the niche activities. I think that's great. Being aware that there's different people who travel different ways, and having those tours available if they're wanting group tours. Um, the companies that are offering those, they're great to work with. They're really listening to what people are saying, and I applaud them for doing that. And then what is also working, I think, really well is people who want to book on their some stuff on their own, but also work with a travel consultant. I think that's becoming wider known, and it's working really well, where people are finding out, oh, I can plan a portion of this myself, and the areas I need help with, I can actually get help with, and I can have this fantastic itinerary that encompasses all of my ideas and my wants.
All right. So hybrid is a new thing then that people are
Not
attracted.
not new, but I think people are just finally aware to it, that there are people who are willing to actually work with them with that hybrid itinerary.
Yeah. Well, I think that uh, it should be encouraged, because I think if people are willing to do things themselves, they're going to, there's a real possibility that they're going to experience something that they wouldn't uh,
Yes.
of if it had all been planned in advance.
Hmm.
I think we all need a bit of spontaneity as well as
Oh
plan
yes.
in our lives. We can over plan, I think.
Yes, we can.
Well, Amber, it's been amazing having a chat with you. I could chat for ages, as I as I mentioned at the very beginning. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate you making the time to have a chat to us today. And yeah, well, I hope you have many happy trips planned for yourself and people you're helping with. And yeah,
Thank
thanks
you,
very
and thanks for having me.
yeah, you're most welcome.